So our next speaker is going to be Joe Serene, and he is the treasurer and publisher at the American Physical Society. He's going to be talking to us about open access, APS, and chorus.
How do I change my slides?
I've got to get them up on
It's the right
but
button.
I've got to get them up on here. Just a minute, Joe. I have to figure out how to get your thing on the screen. Where's my... Okay. Could you ask George to come up? I can't get
While we're playing with the electronics, I want to say that I have already managed to lose my name tag, so if someone found it on the floor, I would be happy to have it back. Probably won't be the first time today, the last time, I mean. I want to be clear that this is their computer, not mine, right? Okay, we're in business? Okay. Thank you for inviting me here today. I want to begin with sort of three meta comments, some of which you've heard already, but I think I really want to emphasize, at least in my view, the scientific publishing landscape is tremendously rugged. It represents a vast array of disparate disciplines with their own traditions, funding sources, and so forth and so on. And I would say even within disciplines, there are enormous differences. I mean, inside physics, there are people who work at huge accelerator labs. There are people who do desktop experiments. There are experimentalists who do no, theorists who do no experiments at all, right? And this is the difference in scope and funding and all those things of these people is just enormous, and one always has to keep this in mind. The second bullet is, for this reason, generalizations are really dangerous. So I'm going to talk a little bit about APS initially, and I want to warn you against generalizing from what I tell you. I'm really just telling you about one place. And finally, another corollary of those, data is really important. We have to really pay attention to specific cases. So outline, I'm going to give you, first of all, an overview of APS just as an example, just as one bit of data. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about this Chorus initiative. So APS has a position on open access. There it is. I think it's probably shared by a lot of society publishers, and in a certain sense, even by a lot of commercial publishers. But basically, we are happy to have the widest distribution as possible of the things we publish, but it costs us money to publish things, and we have to cover those costs. A real quick overview of what we do. We publish about 19,000 papers a year. We have 7 hybrid journals that publish either some things behind a subscription paywall or articles that have paid an article processing charge. Those are published open access under a CC BY license. We started doing this in 2006. You can see the percentage of those journals that actually take up that open access option. It's growing, but it's still very low. We also have 3 gold open access journals, one that started in 1998, 2 that are more recent. And again, these are small. They are at this point, all of them, to a certain extent, subsidized by APS. since everybody wants to brag about impact factors, I will say that Physical Review X just got its first impact factor, which was 6.7, and we're very happy with that. Let's see. The other thing I would say is that, again, about these funding models for open access journals, the Accelerators and Beams journal is actually funded by contributions from accelerator laboratories. It's not author pay, so it's a bit of an odd duck too. We have been a very green open access friendly publisher, and I think we're probably a little unusual in the extent of this, and I'm not saying everybody else could or should run this way, but it's an example. We've never had embargoes of any sort, pre or post publication. We allow our own PDF to be posted on an author's site or an institutional repository. We have no limitations on educational use. We have a very generous policy on authors forming derivative works, and we have agreements, for instance, with Harvard and MIT that actually allow them to just harvest stuff from our sites and put them on their repositories. So, as near as we can tell, none of this has hurt us, although it's really hard to tell what's going on when you look at large-scale publishing statistics. And again, there are all sorts of special reasons that might or might not be generalizable. It's important to realize, I think, talking about what OSGP has done, that certainly for us and I think for many publishers, publishing is a tremendously international business. Only about a third or a little less of what we publish comes from the US. Even a smaller fraction of our volunteer peer reviewers come from the U.S. So it's really an international business. We have a tiered pricing system. The bigger you are and the more you use the journals, the more we charge. It has 5 tiers. Places like Stanford and Berkeley are all in the top 2 tiers. And the point of this slide is just to show you that they contribute a very small part of our revenue. And a large part of it comes from places that don't do a huge amount of research, where there are not a lot of papers submitted. And at least for us, that's the real challenge of making gold open access work. You cannot take the money that the Stanford libraries pay for their subscription and move it to pay APCs. It won't come close, because you're all being subsidized by little four-year colleges. That was off the record? Well. People, there's a lot of talk about usage history. This just shows you ours for these 5 different tiers. The one on the bottom, you notice, is a log plot. And you'll see so this is the downloads in 2012 from our site plotted versus the year in which the article was published. And what you see is that these things have a pretty long tail. There's several orders magnitude difference between the big places and the small. But if you normalize these things to the number of downloads per paper per institution, the curves all have the same shape. And just for whatever it's worth, only about 20% of our downloads happen in the first year. You have to go out between 4 and 5 years to get half, and to get 70%, you have to go out 10 years. So, and this is the last APS slide. Nobody really knows what the effects of green open access are on journals. But we do have one piece of data, which is that starting in the archive started in 1991, and it contains essentially everything that's published in our high energy physics journal, Physical Review D. So that's one place where everything is in one place in a public repository. This is the same sort of a plot. This was from 2009, but it hasn't changed very much, showing you downloads by journal for Physical Review D, the lower blue curve, and for three others of our journals that are much less fully represented on archive. And you see there really is a difference, and it's a significant difference. There are the breakaway happens in 1991. And right now, the number of downloads from PRD is about a factor of 3 smaller. Interestingly, so as not to leap to conclusions, there's no difference in the subscription history for those journals. There again can be there are many reasons why that could be the case, but that's one bit of evidence. Okay, now I want us to switch gears and talk about Chorus. You've already heard the how to understand the acronym, so I won't repeat that. I want to just say a little background that when the OSTP memo was released, I think this actually started sort of spontaneously a couple of places, but I was sitting with a group of society publishers. We looked at the OSTP memo, and of course everybody looked at what it says about what has to happen, but there were 2 other things that jumped out at us, that also have already been commented on. One is that whatever happened had to happen within existing agency budgets. And that worried us, right? I mean, we're scientific societies, we worry about the support of research, and it was pretty clear that if agencies spent a lot of money on doing this, it's money that wasn't going to get spent on doing science. And the other thing, of course, was the requirement to leverage existing resources and form partnerships. So we looked at this, and it struck us that if you look at the requirements on agencies from the OSTP, we were actually capable of providing a lot of what's required at really not a lot of expense and not a lot of extra effort. And if we did that, we might save more money for science. So we tried to get organized to do this. There was a group set up called Chorus. This is its steering committee, which, as you see, it's very diverse. It includes both society publishers and very large and important commercial publishers. It has a whole lot, at this point, a whole lot of people have signed up to be part of this thing. So this is a long list. It's probably too small to read. I apologize. It's there just mostly to show you that there are a lot of people on the list, but most of your favorite publishers would be there. And I want to say that, it's very hard to get really good data, but we believe that the people on this list publish a very, very large fraction of the federal agency-supported work. The place we've looked hardest is DOE, and there we know that the number is at least 90%. So it's not everything, but it's a whole lot of the papers covered by the memorandum. So I want to go through what we think we can provide, and I want to say we really are going to do this. I mean, this is not a maybe. We're moving forward to do. Some of the details may be a little different than what I described, but most of these things are going to happen. And we hope that we're going to do it. We hope it will be helpful to agencies and that it will indeed make things easier for them. So the first problem is, how do you find the papers, right? Myron mentioned this as well. It's really hard to find what papers have been published and been supported by any particular agency. Because although most papers contain an acknowledgement, those acknowledgements are phrased in all sorts of different ways, and what's provided is different from paper to paper, and also they have not been tagged into the XML metadata of papers in a way that makes it very useful. So there was an existing project, independent of OSTP, to try to solve this problem. It's a thing called, did I describe it here? Yes, it's a thing called FundRef. The idea was to get a standard tag for XML metadata and a standard vocabulary for describing funding agencies and a standard format for ingesting grant numbers. Elsevier helped a lot with this. They had already a huge database of funding agencies. There are at least 4,000 funding agencies across the world currently in the FundRef dictionary. So we're all going to do this. We're going to tag appropriately. I mean, we can't make authors acknowledge their support, but if they do, we will tag it and put it in the metadata. Crossref, which is the organization that makes also, it's what manages the DOI world. It's what makes it possible to find papers and to link references and so forth. They're going to include this into their standard metadata, and so finding papers is not going to be all that hard. And again, this was a partnership that involved Crossref, publishers, and a bunch of funding agencies. And the next question is the access requirement. What we propose to do is to identify, every time one of us publishes a paper, identify who its funder was. We will know what the required embargo period is, and when that embargo period ends, we will flip a switch. I mean, we will automatically flip a switch. Nobody has to flip a switch, and change its access status and make it open. There is some discussion among publishers about exactly what will be made open, because the OSTP memo says either the author's final version or the version of record. And I mean, our position is we want as many people on board with this as possible, so we're going to require the minimum if you want to be part of Chorus, but I think some people will provide more than that. So, I really want to say this is not a hard IT project, and nor is it a hard IT project for us to notify agencies and universities when this has happened. The information's there, and so we will do it. We will also set up a centralized repository at Crossref to collect all this stuff, and we'll provide it to agencies in whatever form is useful to them. And we're happy to talk about customized APIs and so forth to do that. Search and discovery. Well, some of us have had experience with trying to generate federated search engines, and we've been a little disappointed in some of our success at doing that. But really, if you look at the world, this is something that the commercial IT world does extremely well, and it's not clear that we want to be in competition. So we want to set things up so that it's easy for, and we do, almost all of us, make it easy for people like Google and Google Scholar and Microsoft Academic Search to find stuff. They will have this FundRef metadata tag to work with as well, we will have a centralized portal, but just a very general one that'll let you find things by agency or topic or something. But I mean, our view really is that this is not a place where we should be trying to run the show. Archiving and preservation, well, we do this already to a very significant extent. We first of all archive our own content ourselves because we want to be sure we don't lose it. But essentially all major publishers deposit with one of the third-party archiving organizations that were mostly set up by librarians with publisher cooperation. And the two that I think that we know fit the OSTP requirements, at least appear to after our conversations with agencies, are Portico and Clocks. We would certainly have to modify our agreements with all of them so that government agencies also had control of a trigger to make this stuff visible if for some reason we went out of business or went rogue, or however you want to describe it. And there also are, there are some agencies already have their own dark archives. That's fine. And there are university repositories. The proposal by Cher to integrate those. The archive is an example of that. I mean, I think all these things. And then there are these compliance issues that Myron talked about. Well, he's absolutely right. Compliance is a matter between agencies and the people who receive the funds. But we can certainly provide information to make that process of verifying compliance pretty simple. I mean, we can guarantee that anything that sits on one of our platforms and has properly referenced its support will be made publicly available at the appropriate time. So to that extent, we can guarantee compliance, and we can provide, as I said earlier, the information about what papers have been opened to agencies, universities, et cetera, as desired, and we're happy to work with both groups to figure out how to do this most efficiently and effectively. And I guess I would also say that we're perfectly aware that we're not going to catch every single agency-funded paper, right? There's a huge world of publishers. We can't guarantee we have them all. I don't think anybody can guarantee that they catch them all, but we can certainly go a very, very long way. It may be that if share gets going, it can also catch some things that we don't catch. We're very happy to integrate with things like share to try and do the job better. So that may be my last slide. Is that true? I guess it is. I did have a last slide, but I chickened out and took it out. Because I was worried about copyright violations, which publishers should not do. But it was a comic strip that you've all seen. Well, you've seen variants of it. It's one of the ones where Charlie Brown is about to kick the football, and Lucy holds the football, and he runs up, and she pulls it away, and Charlie Brown falls on his back, and there's some back and forth about trust. I think there are real issues of trust among all the people involved in this, among publishers, agencies, and librarians, and those aren't going to go away. But I really hope that we can work together the OSTP memorandum is there. These things are going to happen. We should figure out ways to make them work in ways that are optimally effective and efficient for science. And so that's what I think where I would like to see Chorus and its collaborators go. That's it.
Questions?
Stu Levin, consulting faculty here at Stanford, and I came from 30 years in industry, so I got two perspectives. Is the OSTP memo going to become more and more irrelevant with the increasing cuts in federal funding of science?
Well, you say, is it going to become more and more irrelevant?
Yes.
I hope not. If there really were to be substantial cuts to agency funding the funding that actually gets to researchers, why, yes, it would, because there'd be fewer papers covered. I mean, that's a crystal ball thing, but I really hope that's not where we're headed. I'd rather have the problem of worrying about the OSTP memorandum than have fewer papers around to publish and less science getting done.
Bob Schwartzwalder, Stanford. I have to comment on that subsidizing the middle-sized universities, because really when you look at these tiers, the prices are incrementally higher as you rise in the tiers.
Absolutely.
One of the Berkeley comment about some of the gold models, if you look at Archive, if you look at Scope, what they do is really place or seek to place all of the cost on the tier one. What in effect is happening is, and when we look at page charge models, this is also true, you're really taxing the institutions that are providing the most number of manuscripts to the publishers. And I think this is self-defeating. The higher use of the databases, the higher use of the journals correlate very strongly with higher production of articles that are coming back. You can't treat those manuscripts and the work that go into them as a zero-cost option. That is a real value that's coming out. In terms of really enhancing the availability of science, we don't want to have models that are punitive toward people who are the strong net producers of science.
Well, I don't think our policies are punitive. The spread of APS subscription prices right now between the lowest tier places and the top tier places is about a factor 2.7. And look, it's still the case that if you look at where our revenue comes from, that slide says what it says. That's absolutely honest.
No.
It's not coming from places like from tier 4 and tier 5 institutions.
But that's because there's so many more tier. I mean, if you really look at the
you're
middle
absolutely
tiers.
right. Sure.
But and I'm not accusing APS. I mean, I think there's a trend here that is going on, though. We are seeing this with societals and other publishers where they're shifting the cost models toward the larger universities.
I think that's correct. I would, but there's another side to what you said, which is the largest fraction of what it costs us to produce our journals is the review process, and so you're absolutely right. We're doing much more of it from large institutions. So it's how this balance should go. I don't think anybody knows for sure. If we charged by usage, Stanford would pay 100 times more than Allegheny College or something, right? We're certainly not doing that. Nobody wants to do that. So the question is, what's the right balance? And it's a hard question. So I agree with that.
Hi, William Gunn with Mendeley. So it's my understanding that Archive is funded primarily by the top institutions, right? So maybe that's part of the reason that the dynamics work the way they are for APS specifically. So I would agree, like you said in your first slide, probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to overgeneralize here. A lot of the discussion talks about data coming from historians and humanities and stuff, which again is not necessarily so relevant to the discussion we have here. I just wanted to comment on the core system as you guys have described it. It's the first IT project I've ever heard a publisher say would be trivial, and I've spoken to a lot of publishers. And given that we really don't have a good federated search across repositories and other than Google Scholar, how are publishers going to technically make this work for people? I mean, it's obviously there's a short timeline, right? You guys have until you had 6 months to get something together to throw it up there. That presumably is why librarians weren't included in discussions originally about how this should work as well. But if you could maybe just provide a little more detail of why exactly this is going to be so easy when all of the things in the past haven't been, that'd be useful.
Well, I mean, the reason it's easy, quote, look, nothing's absolutely easy, but the reason it's relatively easy is that you're looking for a single piece of information. You want to know who funded a paper, right? And if as we believe is going to happen, if publishers, as they have with Crossref and DOI, if they really, to a significant extent, and we hope an almost universal extent, implement FundRef, then that crucial piece of information is there in a absolutely standard metadata format, and it's you know what you're looking for, you know what it means when you find it. So that's a relatively trivial database query and manipulation problem, and that's the kind of thing we do all the time. Our search engines do stuff. Our own search engines do stuff just like that, and as long as it's universally there and in a standard format, it's really not so hard. It's when you have to look for things that are phrased in 100 different ways and located in 100 different places, then quickly things get hard.
It's incentives, right? Well, the incentives for people participating in course really are aligned in saying, in not having the database as complete as it could be. And so So where is that incentive to make it as full as it could be from a company?
I'm not sure I follow the question. Our incentive for doing this, and this is not, we're not just completely philanthropists in this activity. Our incentive is that we want people to come to our websites. We want eyes on the APS platform and the Elsevier platform, and take your pick. Absolutely. So that's our incentive, along with I'm really serious. We really want to make it possible to do this as efficiently and cheaply as possible, and those are the two incentives for us.
So my name is Lisa Schiff. I'm with the California Digital Library at the University of California, and I was wondering if you could talk about how Chorus proposes to address access to associated data sets.
I have to tell you that we have not grappled with that problem. I would just say it's very much like what Myron Gutman said at the beginning. Data sets the access to data sets, the format of data sets is still an unsettled and evolving topic. We wanted to address the part of the problem that we understand, and these are separate parts of the OSTP memo. They're clearly coupled, but here was one piece of it that we thought we understood and could help with a lot, and that's where we focused. We're perfectly willing to go on to talk about data as the data discussion goes on, but right now my sense is that there is so little standardization and consensus about how to handle data that it's too early for us to get into that fray. We have enough to work on where we know what we're doing at this point. So I'm really sympathetic, but I don't have an answer.
All right, thanks, Joe. I think we're going to stop there for the morning.
Thanks.